Right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session on Oxford versus Cambridge, a complete guide to Oxbridge applications for autumn 24 or September 24 intake. We'll be starting in a few minutes. In the meantime, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. My name is Vikram, and I manage the admissions counseling service at Mania Education, the Princeton Review. We have over 20 years of experience in helping students apply to Oxford, Cambridge, as well as other top British universities such as LSE, UCL, and a host of Russell Group institutions. We also have been helping students apply to the Ivy League, as well as top 100 universities across the world. Joining us today is Miss Imogen Reeve-Tucker. Imogen is a graduate of the University of Oxford, and she will be talking to us about the admissions process for Oxbridge. Imogen, welcome to today's session.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us, and our students are very keen, and the audience here is very keen to talk to you, to listen to you, and to interact with you later in the webinar. So how we'll structure this presentation is that as our Oxbridge admissions specialist, you could talk students through the admissions process for about 45 or 50 minutes. After that, we'll open up to questions and answers, and we'll look at questions in the chat option, and we'll decide amongst ourselves whether those questions should be answered by you or by me. So I'll hand over to you for the session now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yes, so welcome. I'll be taking you through this presentation. So a lot of this will be covering the general points of the application process. So there are a lot of points in the process where it gets very, very specific. And what I mean by that is that when it comes to choosing your course, for example, or choosing your college or even choosing your university, there will be specifics within the courses that determine which university you want to apply to that I won't necessarily have the time to go into. But in this 45 minutes, for example, I won't necessarily have time to go through every single course and the different contents and how that might help you choose. But I'll give you a general overview of each part of the process and what Mania will be providing by way of the service. Great, so we'll start off. This just gives you a run through of what you can expect from this presentation. So starting with the Oxbridge admissions insights. So as I said, I'll be giving you a really good idea as to each part of the process, what each part will require, and where we come in terms of support. Secondly, choosing between Oxford and Cambridge. This can be quite hard, and from the outside, they're often seen as basically the same thing, but they are very, very different. The cities are very different, the characters are very different, and the experiences that you'll have at each of the universities are very different. So choosing the right one is very important. Obviously, getting into either is fantastic. And as you might know, or if you don't know, you can only apply to one each year. So what you could do is potentially you could apply to Oxford one year, and then if you didn't get in, maybe the next year you could either apply to Oxford again, or you could apply to Cambridge. But what is important is that you can't apply to both in the same year. Brilliant. Thirdly, understanding the Oxbridge and UCAS application process. So the UCAS application process includes the Oxbridge application process, as in you will apply to Oxford and Cambridge through UCAS, but there are separate parts that are unique to the Oxbridge application process, such as admissions tests and interviews and everything that are separate. But I'll go into detail into the deadlines and registration and all that sort of stuff later on. Interviewing with Oxbridge. So this is very unique. Interviews do exist at other universities, but they are quite specific at Oxford and Cambridge. So I'll be going into detail about that. Entrance tests for specific programs. So not every program requires an entrance test. From what I know, I think Oxford requires more entrance tests for courses, more so than Cambridge. But depending on what you're applying for, there are some courses that at both universities, you definitely need to do an entrance test. But again, I'll provide more detail on that later. Writing a compelling UCAS personal statement. So your personal statement is probably one of the most important parts of your application process. If anything, it just means it's the part that will direct you. It is what you're very much presenting as yourself. It has to be personal and it has to be detailed. It has to be a lot of different things. But yeah, the personal statement is a really, really essential part of your application. So we'll be talking about that later. The UCAS reference letter. So that will become clearer later on in your application process. The reference letter will be provided by one of your teachers or tutors or mentors. But that will be potentially unique to your school, and that will be sorted out likely by your teachers. Finally, choosing 4 more UCAS universities. So as you well know, you will apply to one, which would be Oxford or Cambridge, and then the other 4 are different universities across the UK. I'll go into more detail about it, but Oxford and Cambridge, obviously they are the big names, but there are some really, really incredible universities across the UK that are really worth your attention. And especially if you are deciding to do a specific course, if you know exactly what you want to do, it's really worth looking at what other universities, the facilities that they have, the research that they have. Don't focus too much on just Oxford and Cambridge. Your attention should really be spread as well, just to make sure that you're going to the right university for you, for your ambitions and for your future career. And then finally, profile building for Oxbridge admissions. So profile building is basically everything beyond your academic life or your academic identity. So, what you can show off about yourself, about your personality, and, your levels of dedication and commitment elsewhere in your life, apart from your examinations and your performance in class. Great. So we will start off with, so who am I? My name is Imogen. I studied modern languages, specifically French and Spanish at St. Cat's College at Oxford University. So St. Cat's is one of the biggest colleges at Oxford, and it's fantastic. It has a lot of extracurriculars, so can definitely personally recommend that as a college. But I graduated in 2018, and what I've been doing since is I've been tutoring across a variety of different subjects, namely English, French, Spanish, but also I've been helping with GCSE level sciences, some levels of maths, but a lot of interview practice, a lot of Oxbridge application help, mostly with UK students, but happily in terms of deadlines and the application process for international students is the same in terms of deadlines. There are some details that are different, but in terms of your deadlines and the process, it's pretty similar. So, it's quite easy to find that information. Obviously, what will be different is the visa application and fees and everything like that. So that will come later down the line. To give you an idea of what my application process was like, so just in terms of my personal experience, so I did the MLAT, which is a modern languages admissions test. I did 2. That was a literature part of the exam. There was also the languages part of the exam. Did that twice per language. And then I had 2 or 3 interviews. But what I did in the interview for French, for example, is I was given a poem. I was given about 20 minutes to have a look at that poem by myself. I then came back into the room, discussed that with them, and essentially analysed it, pulled out what I could from the poem, and then it became a discussion with the tutors. Then they pulled up my personal statement and asked me questions about that. So that's another reason why your personal statement is really, really important, because they will pull it up and they will ask you questions about it. So if you put things in your personal statement that you can't support or you're not able to talk about, then that's going to be quite difficult and a little bit awkward in the interview. So that's why you've got to really create a really accurate personal statement, an interesting personal statement, but also one that you know very well, not one that you've kind of forgotten about and then you can't talk about. And then finally, I had a conversation in the languages themselves with the tutors for about 15-20 minutes as well. And I stayed at the college. Obviously, it'll be different for you. You'll likely do your interviews online over the course of a couple of days in December. Great. So talking about how Manya will help you. So it's a long process. It starts in June, is when you should really be looking at creating your personal statement, your profile, and kind of like knuckling down in terms of really deciding where you want to apply and what you want to be applying for. So Manya will be helping you along each stage, each month, and making sure that you meet your deadlines, that you don't miss registrations, that you get all the tests, you register for all the tests that you need to do, because if you miss them, it can be really difficult to get back in. So Manya offers an exclusive service specifically looking at Oxbridge admissions. There is another service that looks at the other universities, so the Russell Group and the University of London. But what we're going to be focusing on today is the Oxbridge admissions, so applying to Oxford and Cambridge, which brings me to my next slide. So the reason why it's relevant to mention the Russell Group universities and the universities of London is because, as I mentioned earlier, you will need 4 other choices alongside Oxford and Cambridge. And it's important to, you will, for example, have your second choice. And the universities will have visibility on where they are on your choices. That may have changed, but when I was applying, I think they do have visibility. So obviously, you want to put the second choice in the right place because you want to make it clear that they are your second choice, so that they feel a bit more prioritized, essentially. So it's not a case of randomly picking 4. You really want to put them in an order that matters. So you want to be choosing the right universities, and that takes time because you really need to look into realistic choices and ones that will suit you. It helps you manage your expectations, and it means that if you don't get into Oxford or Cambridge, you won't be disappointed because you know that the faculties at the other universities that you have chosen are very, very strong. And they will give you everything by way of academic support and will meet your ambitions. So, brilliant. So this is just an example of how Manya has supported some students in the past to get into Oxford and Cambridge. It's a very hard and it's a very competitive process. So it is incredible that these people have got in. So, for example, the subjects are engineering, economics, mechanical engineering, financial economics, neuroscience, business, and biology. So that's just a rundown of some examples of subjects and people who have managed to get into Oxford and Cambridge. Right. So... okay, so things to consider when choosing a service. So something to think about is, Oxford and Cambridge are very particular. As I mentioned earlier, they are the big names. They are known, they have renown, they have history, and they have a very particular approach to how they tutor you or how they nurture your academic life. But things that are really important to consider in terms of whether you apply to Oxford and Cambridge and whether you go through with the whole process is, first and foremost, have a honest look at your academic background. I think that ultimately, because there are so many applicants to Oxford and Cambridge, they do have standards that need to be met for courses, and that means grades. So have you got the A's, basically? Have you got the grades that will match your course so that it's a realistic ambition for you? I think it's good to recognize that, it is very competitive. So, almost don't, if you feel like your academics aren't up to scratch at that or up to the standards of Oxford and Cambridge, then recognize that. And there are some fantastic universities that you'll also suit. That being said, they do look at lots of other factors. So, if you feel like your academic background could be a little bit stronger, but you feel like you're stronger in other areas, then of course, then continue with your application. Your intellectual motivations. So what I mean by that is it's a very rigorous experience going to Oxford and Cambridge. What's really special about the universities is is the rigor in terms of, you have such a high number of tutorials. You are checked in with all the time. You have a very good amount of work every week. So the balance of social life and work is something that a lot of people find difficult. But, if that is something that you want, if you feel like that level of intellectual rigor and, pressure is something that you can grow within and an environment that you will thrive within, then absolutely choose Oxford and Cambridge. Because you do have a lot of tutorials, especially in your second year, you'll have a lot of one-on-one with your tutor. So, if you haven't done the work, then you can't really hide behind another student like you can in school. You have to have done the work. You have to have something to show for it. And then you'll have your reports read to you at the end of term in person. So again, it's all very, there's a lot of visibility on how you are progressing. So it's fantastic. And that's why Oxford and Cambridge do have the reputation that they have, because they keep you to a standard and they don't let you fall from that. So if you like being pushed and if you want to be pushed, and that is the environment that you feel that you would suit and that you will do well in, then yeah, absolutely, Oxford and Cambridge are the choices for you. But yeah, so to give you an idea, Oxford and Cambridge terms are 8 weeks long, whereas most other UK universities have 12-week long terms. So that's a whole month shorter. And that is because they give you so much to do in those 8 weeks that if it were any longer than that, then I think you would actually explode, because it is just such a rigorous and very, very intense 8 weeks. And finally, intended future career. So, look at the course content. You really, if you know exactly what you want to do, and you're not seeing, for example, an area of research in the courses that Oxford and Cambridge offer, but you see that at a different UK university, then potentially that's what you should be focusing on. Are there universities that expose you to areas of research and focus that you want to be going into that aren't offered at Oxford and Cambridge? That is something to consider. So, in which case, potentially look at other universities. But that being said, obviously, the faculties at Oxford and Cambridge are incredible, and maybe you want to diversify and look at what they are offering. But it is really, really important that you look at the content within each of the courses that Oxford and Cambridge offer against other UK universities, rather than just blindly applying to Oxford and Cambridge, because that will come out in your interview. If you're not prepared and you don't know everything about the course and everything that you're going to be doing, then it's not going to come across very well. And it will look like you just applied to Oxford and Cambridge because you want the names on your CV, basically. But yeah, brilliant. So what do you need to succeed? So yeah, so the UK does have a very competitive admissions process, which you'll need to do very well in. So that's where we come in, is just making sure that we can support you on every single element of the admissions process, so that one's not falling behind, because Oxford and Cambridge don't just look at one part of your admissions process, they look at the whole picture. Because if you think they're looking at thousands of applicants, they can't just look at grades. That's not enough. They don't get a whole picture. They will be looking at every single feature to understand who you are as a person, and so that they can differentiate between each of the students and understand who will suit the university best and who they want to take on. So it's really important that you're not falling short on any part of the admissions process. You've got to make sure that it's all very, very strong. So yes, high grades, that's the obvious one. But you also need a very fine-tuned personal statement. And you need to demonstrate that your skills and performance are fit for the UK higher education system. And what I mean by that is especially independent learning. Are you someone who can go away and do research on your own? Are you able to produce projects on your own without too much support? It's very different to school. And sometimes that's the biggest shock going from school to university, is suddenly you don't have, a classroom of people who are all doing the same thing as you. It's a lot more a solo mission. It's a lot more independent. So you will need to demonstrate that you are independent in other ways, not just academic. You need to make it clear that you have high performance in different areas of your life. Could be sports, it could be the arts, it could be anything. It's, everything beyond the academic world that just shows that you have a level of dedication and commitment that will translate into your academic life and performance. So as I said, they will be looking at the whole picture of you. So it's important to think about in your personal statement, what are all the factors that you can be including? Just to give you an overview of the UK as an education destination. So, why choose the UK versus the US, for example? So just to give you some comparisons, so the UK has emerged as the #1 student destination for international students. The US has obviously been through a few political changes, which is, namely Trump, who did have an effect on, acceptance of international students, not just students, but workforce and everything like that. It is getting back to, in the Biden era, is getting back. The UK has a very high quality of research orientated education. The UK is incredibly competitive with the US in that sense. There's a shorter length of education. It does depend on your course. Some courses are 4 years. For example, I think a lot of science courses at Oxford, for example, are 4 years. Languages courses are often 4 years. But if you're doing something like economics, for example, that will be 3 years versus the 4-year course. Everything in the US is always 4 years, if not more. So, it's a little bit more affordable in that sense. It's also just on a basic level of currency, a bit more affordable, the British pound versus the dollar. Also just, for getting home, the UK is closer, it's a bit more convenient. So that's something to think about as well. You do have very short terms at Oxford and Cambridge. You have very long holidays. So you will be going home, once every 8 weeks. So, that's something to think about. And potentially if you want your parents to come visit you, it is difficult going and studying abroad. It is a bit of a culture shock. You are leaving your family and your friends behind. So it is quite nice to have people be able to visit you and kind of, have a bit of support in that sense as well. So that's definitely something to consider. And Manny has obviously got a speciality in terms of supporting with UK universities. It's something that I know a lot about, and it's something that I have a bit of experience with. So you can find a very high level of support from Manya. Great. So covering what seems like a very obvious point is, what is Oxbridge? Some people do get a little bit confused by why it's called Oxbridge. It is literally University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge mashed together, called Oxbridge. I don't really know where the term came from, but it is just referring to the University of Oxford and Cambridge. And it is because they are the two considered the two top universities in the UK, and they're considered complete equals. So they are often, and because they're so competitive in terms of you can't apply to both at the same time, they are often considered in the same way. How to choose. So this is a really big question. And really it is personal. I think that, you may not have the opportunity to visit the cities. So, that might not be a factor that you can consider. However, what you can look into are the courses. So the courses are hugely different at Cambridge and Oxford. They might be called the same thing. So for example, you could have history and English, or economics and management at both universities, but the content of the courses will be very, very different. So it's important that you look into that. It will take time because you want to look into also the structure of exams are a little bit different at Oxford and Cambridge. The importance of exams sometimes in year one at Cambridge are a little bit higher than they are at Oxford. So, it's the structure of your learning. Do you want how much importance or how much pressure do you want put on you at certain points in your career at each university? So there are differences as well, with almost timetables in terms of exams with Oxford and Cambridge. But the courses are hugely different. The locations, I think they're pretty equidistant from London. So they're both at least no more than an hour and a bit, an hour and a half from London. So in terms of location, they're pretty great. The size of Oxford as a city is a little bit bigger. There are more, for example, restaurants or, nightclubs or that kind of thing. Is a little bit bigger in Oxford. There is another university. You've got Oxford Brookes. Whereas Cambridge is very much the town is Cambridge University, and the university is potted around the town. So it is very, very special to Cambridge. Oxford has a little bit more of a few more sort of locals to it. So it's a little bit bigger. So it just depends what you want, but they are overall they're quite similar in terms of size, but Oxford is just a little bit bigger. And why Oxbridge? So this is a really important thing to think about now, but it's also something to think about. You want to think about your answer when it comes to your interviews, because something I've seen a lot is a lot of people getting to interview or wanting to say in their personal statement and then their interview that they chose Oxford or Cambridge because they are famous or they have a good renown. And that's not really a good enough answer, because firstly, that's not going to set you apart from anyone else. Anyone can say that. But secondly, it doesn't really give the impression that you're willing to, it doesn't give an idea of what you're going to bring to the university. It gives the sense of what you're going to get from the university, but they want to hear, what are you going to bring? What kind of academic contribution are you going to bring to the university? How are you going to contribute in tutorials? Are you going to be able to add value to, the research going on at the university? Will you create interesting discussions? Because that's what something the tutors will be looking at. At the end of the day, tutors want people that they will enjoy teaching. You will be someone that they spend a lot of time with, a lot of one-on-one time with. So have a think about why Oxbridge. Something I would say about why Oxbridge is so special is because you are given so much attention. You are given a lot of work, but along with that, you are checked in with, you have a lot of pastoral care. And a lot of that is down to the collegiate system, so the colleges. There are a couple of universities across the UK that also have colleges, namely Durham University has colleges. But what's really, really special about the colleges is that it's an environment where you will live, you will eat, you will have socials, and you will also study. So you will have basically in-house tutors who you can go and talk to, but you'll also have students who study different subjects. In a lot of UK universities, you're often put in accommodation halls with people who study your subject. So there's not a lot of variety in that sense with some of the universities. Whereas at colleges, you have a multitude of different subjects. So that is a really lovely aspect, is that you get to know a really incredibly diverse cross-section of people who study very different subjects. And, if you go on to do a master's, it's fantastic to be exposed to people who are doing masters, who are postgrads, or, people who are studying different subjects or subjects similar to yours, but also doing extra. Maybe that's exposing you to ideas of what you might go on to. It might change your ideas, And also, some people, I've had friends who have dropped out and gone and studied a different course because they've met someone and talked to them about their course and realized, actually, that's the best course for me. So you can actually do that. You can actually go to university and realize, oh, maybe this course isn't the ideal for me. Actually, maybe I want to do something else. So what's lovely about the colleges is that it's also, it's a great way to build a community. It's a very easy way to make friends. You get a real diverse and wonderful exposure to different students who are studying different things. And yeah, you kind of get your socials kind of organized for you. You don't really have to think about it. You have in-college parties, you have in-college events across colleges. You also have intercollegiate sports events. So then you get to meet other people in different colleges. So yeah, the college system is very, very special and gives you a very, very unique university experience, and potentially is probably my favorite aspect of going to Oxford, because it gave me, such a varied kind of exposure. And it kind of really, really elevated my intellectual awareness as much as anything else. So that's what makes them really, really special. So have a think about, what is unique about Oxbridge, what it means to you, and how you'll be able to talk about that in interview and in your personal statement, rather than just, I want to go to Oxford and Cambridge because they're the big names, because that it's not really a very personal answer, and it's not going to stand out. Great. So I've just created a couple of slides to give you a rundown of the colleges at each university. So that's Cambridge. This is Oxford. So Oxford has a few more colleges. It has, but more colleges are postgrad only. So for example, Green Templeton, Linacre, postgrad only, Nuffield. The others all undergrad, all except undergraduates. Similarly with Cambridge, you've got a few that are postgrad only. To give you an idea of the sizes of colleges, so Peterhouse, for example, at Cambridge, it's the smallest. It has 240 undergraduates, so that's pretty small compared to Trinity Hall, which has about 740. So that will be very, very different experiences, going to a smaller college, going to a larger college. So you've really got to think about what kind of environment you want to be entering into. I personally don't know a lot about the reputation of colleges at Cambridge, because I think it's something that you get to know when you're there. You can look up where they come on the tables in terms of how they're performing academically. So for example, at Oxford, you've got the Norrington table. So St. John's is often at the top of the Norrington table. What I mean by that is a survey done to show which colleges are performing highest academically. It changes each year, but it's something, if that's something that you want to be, that's important to you, you want to be at the most high performing academic college, then definitely, have a look at St. John's. But then you've also got, for example, what I know of the Oxford colleges from my time there, St. Edmund Hall, they had a fantastic sports kind of life and facilities. And there were lots of people who are cricket players and rugby players. So, if that's something that's important to you, because your university experience isn't just your academic life, it's the whole thing. And it's important that you think about what else you're going to be diving into whilst you're there. So if sports are important to you, have a look at somewhere like Edmund Hall or Keble. They were very sporty. And then you've got Christchurch, who are they are one of the oldest colleges. You've got the smallest, Corpus Christi. So they've all got different identities, each of the colleges. And sometimes it's useful to speak to someone who went there. So, it might be worth finding someone who went to Cambridge just to understand a little bit more about the identity of each of the colleges. But beyond that, so beyond the environment offered at each of these colleges, what's really, really important are the professors. So, not all of the colleges will offer the courses that you want to study. So that's another thing to consider. So for example, if you wanted to do economics and management, there will be some colleges that don't offer that. So you won't be able to apply there if that's the course that you want to study. So that's something to look into. But, a big part is looking into the professors that are at each of the colleges. If you want to be in the same college as someone who's going to be your professor, who's going to be giving all the tutorials, and you want them to be in close proximity, then find out who they are, find out which college they're at. If, for example, you are a scientist and there is a particular area of research that you really enjoy or you're really interested in, find the professor that's doing that and go to their college. You will get exposure to them, but you might as well go get their one-on-one experience. So look that up. And it also means that, you will be asked in interview, why have you chosen this college? And you have to have a really, really good answer. So, flatter them, say, I really like what you're doing. I really enjoy, I've read such and such book that you've written, your secondary reading on this. Be prepared and be able to give a lot of information on why you want to go to that college. the more personal side of things, like you want to be in a big social college, that's more your decision. Don't necessarily bring that up in interview, because that they can't really help you with that side of things. But, you know, that is something that you do need to think about. What environment do you want to be in? So yeah, firstly, primarily, what colleges do your subject? Secondly, have a look at the professors. Where are they? Which ones are you interested in? Also have a look at how many students who do your course are in each college. Do you want to be in a big group of students who do your course, or do you want to be in a smaller group? Because that will affect your tutorial experience. You know, do you want the opportunity to be able to speak up a bit more often, in which case, you know, you want a smaller group, or do you want a bit more of a cross section, in which case choose a bigger group, choose a college that has a larger section of people who do your course. Another thing to think about is if there are lots of students who do, not very many students who do your course at that college, it's likely going to be more competitive. So, you know, if Brasenose, for example, only accept 3 students to do economics and management, that's not true, I just plucked that. But for example, then yeah, it's going to be pretty competitive. So, you know, if you feel like you want a bit more of a shot, or you want a bit more option, maybe go to a college that has more people who are doing economics and management, just because your chances are higher. You know, if you've got to think of it as a numbers game, it is incredibly competitive. There are so many applicants. There are also more courses that are more competitive than others. I think the courses with the highest number of applications tend to be economics and management, sciences, mathematics, English, history and English, interestingly enough. And then you've got the less competitive courses, just because there are fewer people who are applying to them. So yeah, it depends. You've just got to sort of factor that consideration into it as well. Obviously, choose the college that's going to suit you and your personality and your intellectual curiosities, but also think from a practical point of view, where are you going to have the most chance to get into? You know, if that's something that you want to consider, or, you know, if you're very, very confident in your academic ability and you feel like you want to be in the top of the top of the top, you want to go to St. John's, for example, who I think have an incredible scientific presence, then absolutely do that. What happens as well is you might not get the college that you apply to. There's a bit of confusion around it. There's a bit of a myth, basically. So what sometimes happens is you will get pooled. So you'll be put into a pool. So for example, if I applied to Keble, they might put me into an open application, which means that they will open me up to other colleges. There are many theories as to why that happens, but it's not clear exactly why. There are many reasons. It could be a multitude of different things as to why you are pooled, why you are opened up to different colleges. It could simply be that they've got too many applicants for one course, but they still think you're very, very strong. And so they want to put you into a different college to give you a better chance, or they think that another college will suit you better. So it very much depends. Great. So this is an example of the Oxford admissions process. This just gives you an idea of the deadlines. So let's zoom in. So you start in June, start working on June, choose your course, choose your college, or you decide on an open application, which is what I talked about. So you can also opt to do an open application. So you can apply to and just be accepted by any college, which can be popular as well. Write your personal statements and organize your academic reference from your teachers. You could be starting to check if you need to take a test and what will be involved in your test. And then you start to submit from September. Right, so your tests, a lot of the test registration will take part on the 29th of September. That is often the deadline. So you need to do your research about what the deadlines are. Law is different. Law has different deadlines. October, you'll be looking at your written work and be submitting that by the 10th of November. And then you'll get into interviews in December, and then you'll find out whether you've got in January. So that is just a rough idea of the structure of what you're looking at. So these are just the important deadlines to go over them again. So registering for admissions test by 29th of September. This is true. This is the same for international students, not different. What might be different is medicine, so the BMAT, and law, so the LNAT. UCAS deadline is 16th of October. And then the deadline for the submission of any written work is the 10th of November. And admissions requirements vary per course. So you might need to do a test, you might not. Depends on your course, depends on your college. I'll give you a bit more detail on that. So for example, at Cambridge, these are the subjects that you will have to do a test for. So you don't really have an option. So chemical engineering and biotech, computer science, economics, engineering, law, medicine, natural sciences, and vet medicine, you will have to do a test for that, and you will have to pre-register. So you'll need to keep an eye on that. However, a little bit different, you might have a written assessment for these if you are selected for interview. So you'll find out about that later down the line. So that registration, you'll get contacted about that closer to the time. So you don't have to panic a bit as early as these ones, for example. And it varies. So some colleges might also look at these as well. So this just gives you an idea of where the testing falls. That's Cambridge. Oxford, generally speaking, I'd say Oxford tests a little bit more. You have experimental psychology, economics and management. They all fall under the TSA, the thinking skills assessment. You've got the physics admissions assessment, which looks at anything to do with physics, but also engineering, materials science, maths, classics admissions test, anything to do with classics, history, the LNAT, so that's anything including law. So you can do law and modern languages, law and English, you can do a whole bunch, but if it's got law in it, you're going to have to do the LNAT. ELAT, so anything to do with English. So again, you could do English, literature and language with a combination of something else, but you will have to do an ELAT. Philosophy, MLAT, so that's what I did, the modern languages. The GAT, the geography test, this is new. There's still some information to come out about that. If you look on the Oxford page, they haven't released any information about it yet, that it's just to come. They will have a geography test. So that didn't exist before, that now exists. And then you've got the AMLAT, which is the Asian and Middle Eastern languages test. Great, so interviews. So Cambridge interviews more people. So that's something to think about. You know, if you feel like you want at least the shot at getting an interview, then maybe you apply to Cambridge. That's not the only reason you should apply. That's just something to think about, because Cambridge interviews around 75% of people who apply. So a lot of people go to interview. So they'll often be shorter interviews. You won't necessarily be there for days. You might just be there for one day for a couple of hours. Sorry, you do this online, but you won't necessarily always do multiple. You might be called back, but you'll have a shorter interview. At Oxford, they're a little bit more rigorous, so they only interview around 50% of applicants. So it is more competitive, and for the more competitive degrees, you'll have to do more interviews. So they will keep you there for 3, 4. I don't know anyone who's done more than 4, but it could be something like that. So it really depends on your course. What interviews look like are like mini tutorials. So much like what my experience was, you'll be given a small passage to read if you're doing a literature-based degree, or a small problem. So whether that's maths, physics, or anything like that, or philosophy, you'll be given a theory or a question, and then you'll discuss it. Now, something to keep in mind is that you don't have to be an incredible academic at this stage. What they're looking for is potential. They want to see that you've got creativity and you've got the mind to do these things. So, you know, it's basically, can you sorry about that. They're looking for potential. They want to see that you can become someone who is an incredible academic. They want to create academics, but they just want to see potential. So, and your interview is not the only measure. So don't put all the pressure on the interview. It's just one factor. So what manual will be providing you support with? Primarily, firstly, profile building. You need to make a strong impression. You need to stand out. It's very competitive. You need to show your interests beyond academics. Shortlisting universities, so finding you the best fit college. finding out the reputations, the experiences there, what experience will you have, the professors, what research are they doing, what books have they written, what can you read? And also looking at the other universities that can be in your other UCAS choices. So editing of personal statements. So as I said, personal statement is a really big factor. It needs to be personal. That sounds really obvious. But as I said, you've got to be unique because they are reading lots of these and you need to make sure that it's authentic to you. Obviously show off, but you also want to start conversations. You also want them to pick up on something that you're really confident about. Potentially it's an area of scientific research, or it's an author that you really, really enjoy, that you really want to talk about because you've developed your own opinions on that, that you want to show off. So, point towards the things that you're confident on, but also don't just say, I have thousands of trophies and I have thousands of medals and all these sorts of things, because you can't really talk about. It's not a huge talking point. You want to include things that you can talk about. UCAS form checking. So we'll make sure that everything is on time when it needs to be. You won't miss any deadlines. Everything is full. Everything is filled out correctly. And you have everything you need and you're prepared. And then finally, interview preparation. Now, interviews are different per course, but we need to make sure that you're in a position where you can be your best self. You can handle unexpected questions because they will come. You will be put on the spot and it can be intimidating. So you really need to practice. And it's just practice, talking about yourself and being ready for the sorts of questions that will catch you off guard. Right, so this gives you an idea of the deliverables. So how many hours will we be providing you with on each part of the admissions process? So you will have around 4 hours choosing the right university and choosing your other universities, profile building, looking at who you are beyond all of these things. I'll be pulling out all the things that you've done, what's useful to talk about, what maybe don't include, anything to include or bolster your profile. Your personal statement, this will be a long time because it's really important. So, really thinking about how you can suit the template, editing and finalizing. Finally, reference letter, interview prep, and UCAS and other documents and visa counseling. So this just gives you a bit of a layout of the time that will be dedicated to each of these sections. Right, so the other universities to be looking at. So obviously, excluding Oxford and Cambridge, there are many incredible universities across the UK. And this is the Russell Group. So the Russell Group are a group of universities across the UK that have incredible identities and renown. So they are held to a very, very good standard. Lots of workplaces rate them very high. So these are the other universities that you will be looking at for your other choices in your UCAS application. They're all very beautiful. This is Queen Mary, this is London, this is St Andrews in Scotland. So yeah, if you want to go to a different location other than Oxford and Cambridge, there are some really exciting locations across the UK that have Russell Group universities. So definitely something that we'll be looking at. Similarly, these are the universities in London, also incredibly high standards. You've got LSE, obviously that's economics focused. If you want to do economics, you'll definitely have to be looking at LSE because it's very competitive. It's incredibly high standard and definitely worth your time looking at. Similarly, Queen Mary, King's College London, they're all fantastic. And Royal Veterinary College. Sometimes, if you want to be a vet, maybe look at a college that actually specializes in that rather than Oxford and Cambridge. But again, it all comes down to what you want from the course. This just gives you an idea of the UCAS page, what that looks like. You'll get to know it very, very well. You'll be on it a lot, but it's very, very simple in how it's structured. You will have a UCAS account and you'll often get notifications when things change. You'll get a notification when you've got a message. You'll get notification for a deadline. You'll get notifications eventually when you start to get accepted into universities or if you're on a waiting list. So you'll always be notified. So your UCAS account is a bit like an email account and you'll always have updates and you can track your applications very, very easily. Great. So coming to the end. So an admissions officer needs to see your career awareness, your area of academic interest, overall achievements and creative thinking. So it's really important when you're considering applying to Oxford and Cambridge that you need to look at it holistically. It's not just your academics, it's every aspect of your interests, where are your achievements elsewhere? Sports matters, for example, the arts matter. These are interests because they show different levels of dedication and commitment and curiosity. They really, really want curiosity. They want passion. They want rigor. It's basically just, if you imagine, if you're a tutor, you want to choose someone who you like because you're basically essentially going to be living with them for the next 3-4 years. So think of yourself as a tutor and who would you want to be seeing every single day? What kind of attitude do you want in your tutorial room? Who do you want sitting around the table talking about authors, scientists, and what will they bring? So really think of yourself in a whole picture rather than just your grades and things on paper. It's very much a whole picture. So why the Manual Princeton Review? So just to give you some statistics, 400,000 students guided towards their study abroad dream. 47 undergrads got into the world top 50 schools. 91% of applicants admissions success in top global schools, and 1,400 average SAT score of students in the last 12 months. So yeah, this is pretty impressive stats. So it is really important to have support on this admissions process. It can be quite overwhelming. So having someone alongside you who really supports you, really believes in you, and makes sure that you are putting your best self forward at all points and not letting anything drop is really, really helpful. It can be very scary doing it on your own. Because you sometimes feel like you're a little bit blind to what's going on. And especially when you're applying to somewhere abroad, you can't go to the university necessarily easily. You can't go speak to people in person. So, it is just nice, especially in this particular case, to have support. And finally, so recommendations on suitable career paths. So university is a stepping stone to the rest of your life. So you've got to think beyond. You can't be too short-sighted. Thinking about your career path is something to consider. Obviously, you don't need to know now. You're still very young. You're still very much in the early stages, but it's just something to think about and keeping your options open. Relevant academic stream. So we want to be taking into account your interests, your personality, and your abilities. We don't want to put you forward for something that's not going to suit you. We want to find the right college, the right course, and make sure that when you get there, you don't go, oh God, I've done completely the wrong thing. I'm in the wrong place. And profile building strategy. So making sure that you have all the relevant things. Sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself and it's hard to think of all the things that you've done. And you need someone to go, that's brilliant. You should definitely talk about that. So it's making sure that you're not leaving anything out, that you are putting yourself forward as a really competitive profile and as a really intriguing student that tutors want to take on. Brilliant. So that brings me to the end. Hopefully that has given you a good idea of what it takes and what it involves to apply to Oxford and Cambridge. There are lots of things to think about. And Manual really focuses on making sure that you have support at every stage, because it's really important to go at it in a very structured way to make sure that you are not trying to do all the things at once. You've got to tackle each thing very, very purposefully and make sure that the detail and the quality of each part, your written work, your personal statement, and how you perform in interviews is to a standard that will make sure that you have a really, really good chance, because you only really get one chance at each stage. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time at Oxford, and it means a lot to me to see people succeed and to see people get into Oxford and Cambridge. They are really wonderful universities. So it'd be really fantastic to be able to support people and make sure that, they get the best experience in applying and potentially get accepted. So yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Imogen. That was truly insightful, and for the benefits of our audience here this evening. Imogen is Manya, the Princeton Review's admissions specialist for Oxbridge admissions. So students who will be signing up for our undergraduate admissions service to apply to Oxford or Cambridge and other British universities through UCAS later this year will be working directly with Imogen on their applications. So what we'll do right now is we'll answer some of the questions that have come up in the chat box. Imogen, what I'll do is I'll direct the undergraduate questions to you. And if there are students looking at postgraduate programs, we can decide whether you or I will answer them. Okay, so one question which we have here is the expected budget with tuition fees in Indian rupees. So for Oxford, the tuition fee for different programs ranges from 28,500 pounds, which is around 28 lakhs to 44 lakhs, depending on the program that you plan to study at Oxford or Cambridge. Another question is on career opportunities post-graduation. So Imogen, I'll take that up. So an international student can actually work in the UK for a period of 2 years after graduation from any stream. That's the current postgraduate work study scheme offered by the British government to international students. Okay, Imogen, I'll direct this question to you, please. Sorry, I just lost it. Give me a second. How much percentage does a typical applicant for master's course for Oxford in their undergraduate studies? Also, if I have done a lot of research work with professors, what impact does that have?
So sorry, was that what percentage do you need to have achieved to be accepted into a master's program?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on your course. I think that it will definitely, they will definitely look at the research that you've done. I don't know whether the master's is as specific as percentages. I think that because masters are, specialized, I think that they look at a bit more, it's quite individual. And obviously you will have already done a degree. So I can't really speak to the exact percentage. Potentially have a look on the website. I think that there are some pages that give you an idea of so they translate, for example, we do A-levels in the UK. They've done a translation for it. I've seen for the undergraduate courses, what grades you need to have got and how that would translate into the Indian exams. I think is it CPSE or CBSE or something like that. So have a look on the website. But I'm not too sure specifically about masters. I think that, but definitely the research that you will have done will be so important to your profile. I don't know whether they necessarily are as rigid with grades and marks, because they do accept students from other universities all the time that are, that don't necessarily, but they have different exams, for example, to the Oxford exams. The Oxford exams are at a certain level, different university exams are at a different level. So it's how can you equate them? So, how do you accept someone on a master's if they've done different exams to the ones at the university? So they'll be looking at the whole picture rather than just a percentage. But so yeah, I think it will depend, but definitely have a look at the website.
All right, thank you for that, Imogen. That helps. One student has asked is Ivy versus Oxbridge for undergraduate courses and how to decide. So maybe I'll try to answer that question. And Imogen, if you have something to add, please add on. So Ivy versus Oxbridge, I would say if the student is more academically inclined and they have very good grades to start with, and then as Imogen said during the course of the webinar, they also have very high achievement in certain areas that makes them stand out as applicants, and those could be extracurricular areas as well, then Oxbridge is definitely something the student should think about. There's a distinct possibility that Ivy League universities don't look at academic accomplishments as strongly as Oxbridge does. So if the student has good grades and numerous other achievements in many other areas besides academics, then Ivy is the better choice because the American admissions process is a little more holistic than Oxbridge is. Oxbridge also has a very holistic admissions process. As Imogen has been educating us this evening, they look at your grades, they interview you, they see what you bring to the university. There's an entrance test that you have to take. So Oxbridge does look at everything as well, but going purely by the entrance test and the admissions interview requirements, both of which tend to be a little more academic in nature compared to American universities. I think the deciding factor would be the academic potential of the student. If they are exceptional in studies, Oxbridge is the university they would aspire for. If they are great in studies and also good in many other areas, then Ivy is something they could look at. Imogen, anything you would like to add, please feel free to do so.
Yes, I'd agree, because obviously the Ivy League schools offer scholarships on the basis of, for example, you can get a sports scholarship, which will stand you in greater stead against your academics. Your academics might not be the strongest, but if you are an incredible hockey player who will play for the college, for example, they might offer you a specific sports scholarship. But also something to think about is you in Ivy League schools, you have the option of doing major and minors. So it's a slightly different structure in that you don't fully specialize, you don't just specialize, you kind of have a bit more of a piecemeal of other things and you can do other subjects. If that's something that appeals to you, you know, for example, if you wanted to do humanities, but you also wanted to learn Arabic on the side, you can do that. You can take that as a minor. But Oxford and Cambridge are very, very specialized and are very, which is, if you know what you want to do, they're fantastic for that, because the focus is incredible and you will have everything at your disposal. You know, if you're a little bit in between, then, you know, maybe you want to do lots of different minors and try different things. Oxford does give you the option to do lots of extracurriculars, but in terms of your subject, it is, yeah, they give you a really full-on experience in your subject. So you'll probably get a more rigorous experience with your subject at Oxbridge, but you'll have a little bit less in Ivy League schools because you'll have the option to do minors as well. So it's a bit of a different structure.
Right, thanks for that. There's a question here, are admissions for undergraduate programs open for September 23? Yes, there are some last minute universities which are still out there. You can contact your nearest Mania Center to find out about that. Is publishing a research paper helpful? Yes, it definitely is. It boosts your academic review. It makes the faculty look at you more meaningfully, because research is what is of prime importance in an international environment. So there's one question here. For economics, is it easy to get into Cambridge or Oxford?
They are probably the most competitive courses. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy. They have the highest number of, I think that you can find a list online of the most the subjects with the highest number of applicants, and those will be the most competitive. And that economics is up there because, for example, at Oxford, they've got the Said Business School, which has a huge amount of funding, and it's an incredible place if you want for business studies. So it is an incredible place to be if you want to study economics. So yeah, it's very competitive. They accept, I think, about 5% of applicants compared to, for example, something like 40% for history or geography. So that just gives you an idea of the difference.
Okay. There's a question here, a good time to apply for masters in 2024. So I think by the end of this year is a good time. Early January next year is a good time to apply for masters. So which entrance exams are required? So for Oxbridge, as Imogen was telling us, you may be invited for an entrance test based on the program or the course of study for which you're applying. Besides that, as an international student, it's always good to take your IELTS for admissions in a UK university, because the IELTS is not only required for university admissions, it also helps with your visa process. So there's another question here. Are applications open for undergraduate computer science for fall 23? Yes, they are open at some universities in the UK and at some universities in the US, but they're not open at Oxbridge. So you do have options for September 23 for computer science. Please contact your closest Mania center as soon as possible.
I've just seen a question about entrance tests that I thought I'd answer. So are entrance tests required for undergraduate courses or only for masters? Entrance tests are required for undergraduate courses, not all of them. At Oxford, quite a lot. At Cambridge, you'd have to look. So a lot of science-based, you've got law, you have to do a test, anything to do with physics, a lot of computer science have to do tests. So there are a lot of undergraduate courses that require tests at both universities. So yeah.
So there's another question here. Can we get scholarships for undergraduate programs, like merit-based ones?
Not in the same way that you would get to Ivy League. You can get bursaries. So you can apply for bursaries, which is essentially a form of a scholarship, which you'll fill out. And that will be something that goes through your college and things like that. But they're not, I think that you can be awarded scholarships if you perform very well at your exams whilst you're there. But to my understanding, you get more bursaries, which are more financial aid, that are not necessarily always based on your merit.
Right. So an exceptional student will get scholarships, whether it's the US, whether it's UK universities, and there are various schemes which universities in the UK offer. I'm not just talking about Oxbridge here, but I'm talking about British universities as a group. They offer various different types of scholarships to students from India. There are some scholarships for students who want to study particular subjects. There are some scholarships for female students. So it needs to be looked into. Each university department may offer a scholarship. The international office may offer a scholarship. And these may not be complete scholarships. They may be partial scholarships, but for an extremely good student, even a full scholarship is possible at a top international university. Isha has a question here, planning to pursue MBA, which university is more preferable? So Isha, if you're talking about Oxford or Cambridge, you need to think about what you want to study, because the curriculum is a little bit different. The focus of each business school is a little bit different. So you should look at the structure of the MBA program, the intended specialization. You could also contact your nearest Manya center or email us your CV at care@manyagroup.com, and we'll get an admission specialist from our team here in Delhi to review your profile and to have a session with you on your MBA plans. So Lakshman has a question on job opportunities in the tech industry, data science, artificial intelligence in the UK. So Lakshman, the job opportunities for international students pursuing data science or artificial intelligence or machine learning and these types of computer science or IT jobs is extremely strong at the moment. So you go to university in the UK, you can work in the UK for 2 years post graduation. And if you do well in your job, your employer will sponsor your work permit. And this is something which hundreds of our students who are now studying at the top British universities tell us once they get in touch with us to share their experience. So Kamala has a question here. I have 88% in English. Can I be eligible for Oxford?
Is that the CBSE, sorry. Yeah. What would that equate to in terms of grade? Do you know? A star? Yes, I think that sounds like it depends on potentially how you've done in your other subjects, but to my knowledge, that sounds high enough. It does depend again on your college. Some colleges might require a bit higher. But I'd very much recommend as well having a look on the website, because they do give you a little bit more information in terms of what's expected.
Right. Thank you. Arun has a question. Are entrance tests required for UG courses? So Arun, yes, entrance tests are required at Oxbridge or at the University of Oxford and Cambridge for undergraduate courses. Most of the courses you would apply to would require an entrance test. If you're thinking about applying to the US, there is a standard test, which is called the SAT. That's the only test that you need to take. For Oxbridge admissions, depending on which university you apply to and which program, they will require you for an entrance test. So Arun has another question. Does Manya offer tutoring for UG entrance test prep for Oxbridge? If yes, what is the typical prep duration and fees? So we don't specifically offer test preparation for Oxbridge admissions. We offer a complete service where Imogen will talk you through the test format as well. Of course, you have to prepare for the test, but Imogen will give you a helping hand to understand the format of the test, what you need to look at, and what your areas of focus will be. Imogen, feel free to add anything you would like to this answer, please.
Yeah, so what we can help with is we can help you find past papers, because that will be the best sort of resource for practice. So we can run you through those past papers, but it won't be as specific as, for example, if you're doing engineering, which is not necessarily something that I've studied, it won't be as thorough. Obviously, it will have to come from you, but we can help you find the resources that will help you prepare for the test and at least know what the format is and what it will look like.
Thank you. Isha has another question. Is it important to have any work experience for Oxford or Cambridge? So Isha, I believe your question is aimed at the side MBA or the Judge MBA program offered by Cambridge. So yes, you do require a minimum of 3 years of work experience to apply to Oxford or Cambridge for the MBA, as they are accredited business schools. These institutions will also look at the quality and depth of your work experience. They will look at whether the managerial components of your work experience to see whether you have managed budgets, people, and projects, and activities, even if you're not officially designated as a manager. So the quality of your work experience does impact your MBA admission at Oxford or Cambridge. Charu has a question here. Is not having any extracurriculars a huge disadvantage for applying to top universities? Well, yes and no, Charu. If you've been good at studies, if you have a lot to talk about as far as your academic achievements are concerned, they will buffer for not having extracurricular activities. We at Mane Education, the Princeton Review, we also offer a lot of advice on to students on profile building, both to distinguish themselves in their academics as well as what are the last minute activities they could get involved at their school or in their community to make sure they have something to talk about as far as their extracurriculars are concerned when it comes to applying to top universities. So we do offer a profile building service. We offer a full admissions counseling service. So get in touch with us and we'll set up a session with one of our advisors. So Isha has a question about the PhD program. So Isha, do write to us. We'll set up a call with our PhD admissions advisor, Nilanjan, and he can guide you with your profile and your prospects. Shiva Prasad wants to know the next intake for this year. There is a September intake for admissions in the UK where some universities are still offering admissions. There is also an August intake for admissions in the US where some universities are continuing to offer admissions. So contact Mania's closest center and set up a call with us so that we can guide you on your options for getting into university this year, later this year. Charu has a question, do Coursera courses help? Yes, they certainly help you to build your profile. Coursera courses are non-credit courses, so they will not add onto your academic achievements, but they will help you build your profile and demonstrate your interest in the subject that you want to study or the course or program that your intended program of study. So yes, Coursera certainly gives you good perspective. So Dev has a question on what is the price of the total counseling. The cost of these services, this is priced at around 3.5 lakh rupees, including GST. So please contact our closest center and they'll help you with more details regarding the same. Dev has a question, which intake is the best, fall or spring? So in fall, the entire, all the programs and the academic year starts afresh every fall at all North American, British and European universities. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the academic year starts in the fall. So you have all the programs recruit students into their classrooms in the fall. Selected programs run a spring intake. So if you missed out on the opportunity to start university in the fall, you could still go to college in the US, Canada, or the UK in the January intake. You may not have a complete set of universities that will offer you a seat, but there will be some universities that will offer you a seat for sure. So that brings us to the end of the questions. So it's been great interacting with everyone here this evening. Imogen, we can't thank you enough for taking out your time this afternoon to speak with us, to educate our students on the Oxbridge admissions process. We'll be setting up appointments for you hopefully soon, so that you can, if any students want to work with you on their applications and they want to have a chat with you before they get started, we'll set up appointments for you, telephonic calls or Google meetings for you to interact with these students. For students who are looking to study at university in September this year, you still have a few months to apply to US, Canada, UK, Australia, and other countries. So please contact us as soon as possible. If you wish to start your education this September, there are last minute seats that we could help you get admissions into. Otherwise, it's been great interacting with you. If you have any other questions, please call us on our toll-free number and or the email ID which we have displayed on the screen, and we are happy to get or visit maniagroup.com and send us an inquiry, and we are happy to help you with that. Thank you, Imogen. We'll end the event shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.